It's lovely to have you here. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to have 3 allies. How do we get to a situation where we have male allies queuing up outside the room? Help us understand. We talked about it in the earlier session about maybe is there a fear that somehow from men, but I'd just be interested to hear a male perspective on why is it not more important to more men to be allies in this gender-based violence, any kind of abuse?
It'd be great to hear from all of you on that. Shaykh Ibrahim, if you wouldn't mind starting us off, that would be great.
I think through education, if we can help men within our own faith traditions to acknowledge what the scriptures teach, and that it's imperative upon them to follow what the scriptures say, then I hope that that would give them the courage to start coming forward. As I said previously, culture can be a huge barrier. In some circumstances, so much that the religious teachings are overpowered by cultural practice. And I think within Muslim communities and societies, that has been our major stumbling block, where there is an expectation culturally to behave in a particular way, which is totally at odds with the religious teachings. In the mosque setup, there's no reason why women should not be part and parcel of the board of trustees and the management committee, etc., etc. Yet we find that these are predominantly positions occupied by men. If there are good examples, there are too few. And because of this, the Muslim Council of Britain has devised a Women in Mosques leadership program to empower our young, particularly our young girls and young women, to consider being part of mosque structures where the option is available, to encourage them where there may be apathy and say, well, it's, as Andrew said, it's too much of a hassle, it's too much responsibility, I want to enjoy my life and be with my friends, etc. To say, look, guys, you can make a big difference, you can make a huge contribution. And I like to think that what's happened with the Muslim Council of Britain, with Zahra Mohammed being our first ever female Secretary General, will be inspiring for so many of our girls and our women, and she is, I think, a fantastic role model for Muslim women to look up to, or Muslim girls to look up to, that really if you put yourself forward and you're willing to learn, then opportunities are there. But the men have to make sure that the doors are kept open. Zahra shouldn't be the first and the last. She's the first of many, many more. And this is for across the board, in all of our institutions, not just community organizations.
I wasn't booked to be a speaker, so I won't need to be polite and to stick to the rules, and I'll say what I think. There are. So I'll say a few things that might be controversial, but here's what I think. That's a really good question. I think that interesting thing about what are men afraid of, I think some men are afraid of things. I think some haven't processed it to that extent. It's just this is what we've been told is right. People coming out of a conservative kind of theology and whatever religion, this is just what I've been told Scripture says, and if I'm going to be true to my faith, then leadership looks male. This is how we interpret it. And I think, therefore, there's a whole piece of work about how we teach Scripture that is really true to Scripture and can hold into that conservative space and bring those women's voices and the role of women in leadership to the fore. I'm very keen on all sorts of things. When I talk to very conservative Christians about why they should get involved in interfaith work, I say you should do this as a conservative Christian. I'm not asking you to give up where you're at. I'm asking you to see that even within that tradition, you can find the space to be involved in interfaith work. You can find the space to affirm women's stories, women in leadership. And I think there's a task to do that from within that tradition. And that's tough. And that's for people like, sometimes for men to be saying to other men, this is how we need to be interpreting these scriptures. This is how we need to understand this. And it's our responsibility, as Ibrahim said, when we get given, when we get asked to speak because we're a man, to say, okay, but I'm bringing the woman with me. Or actually, why do you need to listen to me? You need to listen to a woman. To hold the space for others, to recognize where we can do that. And I do think there are two other things that are slightly controversial. So one is, I'm always torn between, and I know some people are, is should I come along, but is this an event for women? And if I'm there as a man, does that change it? Is that unhelpful if I'm there? So I'm trying to do some work at the moment about supporting women clergy in kind of multi-faith context in Birmingham. And I keep saying to them, well, do you want me to organise this or should I not? I mean, it's my job to, but I'm a man and I don't want to. So, and knowing the right way to do that, and I think some people feel slightly paralysed. Should I be there or not? I'm very conscious that if anyone walks past the door now, they see three men talking to a group of women. I really hope. But that was the first thing I thought of when I sat down, because I don't want to. So there's a bit of paralysing thing. And then the other thing, and this is one of the challenges for all our faiths, is that whilst we've got women in leadership, in academia, in politics, we only get the one dong this time. I get it shorter. In some traditions, in all our faiths, spiritual leadership is still male. And I know that's a big thing to overcome. I work for a church that has women because I work for a woman bishop, but not all do that within the Christian faith by any means, and other faiths. And I think there's that challenge of how all the good kind of academia and teaching, how we get the people who are spiritual leadership, if for the foreseeable future they're going to be men, how we make sure those as spiritual leaders are giving space for women to be spiritual leaders as well, in whatever form that can be. And we might want to push for change, but I think we need to recognise there is that challenge as well.
Just to add to what Andrew said about the misuse of religious scripture, that's something that's widespread. So I'm pursuing a PhD in spiritual abuse, so that's what that's about, and I'm looking forward to doing that. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I've seen for myself, it was when I first started out working for Strengthening Faith Institutions, and I went to a place of worship, and we were delivering a safeguarding training, and the safeguarding trainer, she's our best safeguarding trainer, was a woman, and she was standing there. She started delivering the training to an audience of men and women, and an imam rushed in and said, no, it's against the Quran for women to teach men anything. Luckily for us, Imam Farouk Mullah, who's an absolutely phenomenal individual, he's done work on spiritual abuse with Professor Lisa Oakley and Dr. Ramanara Chowdhury, came in and held that Imam accountable at the time, because he himself was Imam, and challenged him and said, no, that's not true. And I think having that sort of culture of accountability and not letting individuals necessarily get away with it is so important. Putting that to a different context, at Faith Forum for London, we would run different events around climate change, domestic abuse, and we would also run panels. And you need to make sure you've got a gender diversity within the panel. But a lot of, and you still see it right now, and sometimes when I see on Twitter that a faith-based organisation is running an event and there isn't any female representation, I'm like, how can they do that? And the reason they can is because they get away with it. So it's so important that we hold those organisations accountable, that individuals within those organisations do hold them accountable. And I think that's why it's so important that, talking from a young person and a young person's perspective, we bring young people into these institutions, into these organisations who have, you can say, maybe more progressive ideals, but those individuals that are going to happily confront these oppressive gender norms and attitudes. Yeah.